everyone. On behalf of the Lung Health Foundation, I'd like to welcome you to our third webinar in our Halt the Haze learning series. My name is Erin Dufour. I'm a manager of implementation at the Lung Health Foundation, responsible for the QUASH program and your host for today's webinar. As part of today's sessions, there was an opportunity to submit questions in advance when you registered, and we did receive a few, so we've integrated them throughout the presentation. Before we begin today's program, the Lung Health Foundation would like to acknowledge its commitment to the recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We acknowledge the land that we are working on because it is important to remind ourselves that we are working on behalf of all Canadians, including Indigenous peoples who have been and continue to be negatively impacted by Canada's colonial history. It's impossible to have valuable conversations about lung health in Canada without connecting these conversations to the harms done to Indigenous communities. To this day, Indigenous peoples in Canada face health disparities and poor lung health outcomes. While we continue to learn, the Lung Health Foundation is committed to doing our part in reducing these health disparities and enhancing the healthcare system to meet the needs of Indigenous communities. Given today's topic, we also want to acknowledge that for thousands of years, natural tobacco has been an integral part of Indigenous culture in many parts of Canada. It's used in ritual, ceremony, and prayer, and tobacco has been considered a sacred plant with immense healing and spiritual benefits. For these reasons, the tobacco plant should be treated with great respect. When tobacco is used in a non-traditional manner, it can cause severe damage to the lungs and contribute to chronic lung conditions. In today's webinar, when the reference to nicotine and tobacco is made, we are referring to commercial tobacco products. We should also be very careful not to confuse its sacred uses with commercial tobacco and the addiction epidemic we see today. Before we start off and getting into the content of the evening, we're going to ask you to participate in some of the polling questions that we pulled up here. Should be on your screen. Give everybody a few seconds to complete them. You can see them on your screen. Okay. Thank you. So get into a little bit of an overview of tonight's session. So we're going to kind of walk in how did we get here and talk about the youth vaping epidemic, some of the health impacts of vaping, how to have supportive conversations with youth, and then key elements of a supportive conversation as well. Just for a little bit of background on who we are, the Lung Health Foundation is a national charity that works to help people living with or who are impacted by chronic lung diseases. You may have noticed previously as the Ontario Lung Association, but in 2019, we did rebrand to a national focus, recognizing that 1 in 5 Canadians are impacted by a chronic lung condition. Through our work at the Lung Health Foundation, we help Canadians manage their chronic lung conditions or avoid behaviors that contribute to them, with a specific focus on asthma, COPD, lung cancer, infectious respiratory disease, and smoking and vaping prevention and cessation. It's just a fancy word to say helping people quit smoking and vaping. Under the work of the smoking and vaping quit aid programming, we do it through QUASH, which is our youth smoking and vaping cessation program. And so it's for youth ages 14 to 30 that helps them create a custom quit plan to help them quit smoking or vaping. It's offered in English and in French.
So you're doing this. You're ready to quit. You're committing. Awesome. But now what? Where do I even start? Are there tricks? How do I fight cravings? What happens if I get stressed? How do I quit? Well, the truth is, so many teens just like you are wondering the same thing. And we know that, so we created Quash. Because quitting isn't a one-size-fits-all experience. It's about becoming smoke or vape-free in a way that works for you. Use the tools that will keep you motivated. That's what Quash is all about. It's about taking control, setting realistic goals, and living your life smoke or vape-free. It's about quashing your cravings. Check in when you need to. Log your cravings whenever they creep up. Track how intense they are, how you are feeling, and what situation you're in. It's about seeing how far you've come, seeing your longest quit streak, how much money you've saved to boost and energize you. It's about understanding what you need, recognizing patterns and finding ways around them, and ultimately making healthier choices. We know you can do this. We know you want this. We want you to succeed, and we're so ready to do it with you. So let's do it. Time to get quashing.
Before we get into kind of the youth vaping topic, I wanted to just get you thinking about something and when it comes to our health and our everyday life. So every single day you take about 22,000 breaths. And when I often engage with different audience and I ask them, what's something unconscious that you do every day that you don't even have to think about? I always get answers like I brush my teeth, I make a lunch, I take a shower, I wash my face, I just scroll on my phone, I check my emails. But really, very rarely do I ever hear someone reference I breathe. And it's something that we take for granted, really, and we take our lung health for granted. Sometimes when we think about, that those are literally keeping us alive and they're breathing for us 22,000 times a day. I couldn't imagine, scrolling my phone 22,000 times a day. And so when we think about that and when we think about the youth vaping epidemic and we want to put things into perspective, on social media, and this is just Instagram alone, hashtag smoking and hashtag vaping have over 12 million hashtags on posts that reference this behavior that harms our lungs, that really keep us alive. But then when we look at the flip side of it, when we look at something that helps our lungs, like hashtag quit vaping and hashtag quit smoking, the numbers are only in the tens of thousands. So let's take a few steps back and figure out how we even got here. How did we get to this point? So close to 20 years ago, the Lung Health Foundation, formerly the Ontario Lung Association, played a very important role in the Smoke-Free Ontario Act. And so while there has been a decrease in the smoking rates in the last 10 years, we've seen a huge rise in the vaping rates across young people, especially. And then with this rise in vaping rates, you could kind of say we're living in this generation's pre-smoke-free Ontario. So when I grew up in the smoke-free Ontario phase. I remember when the public health nurses would come to our school and tell us, please don't smoke. This is what it could happen. And like they showed you the big, black, scary pig lungs at the front of the class and they blew them up with air and they deflated them. And, a lot of my peers and we don't smoke because this was a tactic that they used. Well, years and years and years went into getting to that point of knowing what lungs actually will look like after exposure to smoke that often. And so now we're in that period where we don't know what those lungs are going to look like in 10, 15, 20 years. It's just kind of this big question mark when it comes to vaping. And so we're really in that like pre-phase right now, which is kind of alarming. And so when we think about vaping, has it really become the 21st century way to smoke? Well, if you look at the data, 16.6% of Canadians 15 and older have tried an e-cigarette. And in Ontario alone, we estimate that there's approximately 90,000 high school students vaping daily. And there are several other stats we could talk about, but when we actually just Google a quick, Canada vaping, like two very simple words, the articles that show up primarily are all youth focused. So it really goes to show how alarming that these stats, this has really gotten because it's very youth focused in Canada. So why are youth doing it? The most common reason for vaping among high school age students is to reduce stress and help manage their anxiety. Other reasons also include for the flavors. So that's a kind of a second reason that they use a lot, is that the flavors that these vape products come in. The social aspects of vaping. So their friends are doing it, so they want to fit in too. So they're going to try vaping. They also consider vaping to be less harmful than cigarettes, and they enjoy the feeling of the rush of nicotine. But among those who, high school age students who are vaping, 60% of them have never smoked cigarettes. But those youth who are vaping are 3.6 times more likely to smoke in the future. But do they even know it's harmful? So 31% of them, of high school age students who have vaped in the last 30 days, perceive vaping to be somewhat less harmful than cigarettes. So they know it's harmful, but it's somewhat less harmful. Almost 50% of them also report that there's a great risk when it comes to using e-cigarettes. And then shockingly, of those ages 15 to 19 who vape daily, 60% of them have tried to quit in the last year. And so when we look at that data in Ontario alone, it looks, if you think about it, we've estimated there's almost 90,000 of them who are vaping, but there's, based on these numbers about quit ratios, there's about 55,000 of those youth who are actually looking to quit or thinking about quitting. So let's think about this for a second. If youth are identifying that the risk of vaping is high, and yet 60% of them have tried to quit vaping, how are the numbers of youth who are vaping still so high? Let's do a little introduction to vaping then and kind of dive into what it really is. So if you're not familiar with vaping, vaping is, it's when you use an e-cigarette. So it's an electronic nicotine delivery system. So that is what they're actually using to vape. And then vaping refers to just the use of an e-cigarette, because many people believe that e-cigarettes can create a vapor when you are exhaling it. So what do vapes look like? So it's really important to know that vape products are regulated in Canada. However, there are many products that are still sold out there on the black market. So it's important to know that not all vape products look the same and are created the same. They're very sophisticated in the way that they are manufactured now. So you can see here, this just looks like a hoodie, but that's actually a vape. So the strings on the hoodie that's a vape device that you can use the hoodie in class and vape while you're in class. And then they also have, lip glosses and lipsticks, and also feminine hygiene products that they're masked as, so that you can have them and really conceal them. So a really big common misconception is that vaping is just water. And it's not. That vapor that you're exhaling it's not just water. It's an aerosol that contains propylene glycol and vegetable glycerin. And these chemicals are the same chemicals that are used to produce stage or theatrical fog. So if you go to a concert, you go to a play, even at weddings now, they have these fog machines. Those chemicals are actually what you're inhaling while you're vaping. So it's not just flavored air, like I said, there's also 2,000 chemicals and cancer-causing ingredients that can cause harm to your lungs when they're inhaled. So these are some of the names, the chemical names of um, the chemicals in the products, but they're also found in these household items. So antifreeze, fertilizer, car exhaust, and embalmed bodies. And so it's alarming to think because if you asked anybody, especially youth, would you vape antifreeze? Would you vape fertilizer? How about, the fluid that we use to preserve a dead body in? I'm sure all of them would say, no way. But because they're packaged in these fruity tooty and bubblegum flavors, they don't even think twice about it. So, what are youth vaping? So, like I said, all the vape products are regulated in Canada, especially cannabis. However, like I said, there's also these black market products sold out there under the counter that youth get their hands on. And so when we think about it, whatever a youth is vaping, it could contain nicotine or it can contain cannabis. Both devices are very similar. They're very discreet, easy to conceal, and they can leave little to no odor, and it doesn't stick on your clothing. So something really, important to think here is most of these flavors that youth are vaping have a scent to them because they have a flavor to them. So most youth, like you would know what they're vaping or if they're vaping because you would normally smell something. So one of the questions that we got is how do I even know if my child is vaping? Because like I said, these are very easily discreet devices that they're using. You might not even recognize them if they're laying around in your house, which is really interesting. So they can be concealed as really anything now. So when we think about how do we know if my child is vaping, really, you can kind of think of different signs of vaping, such as new health issues, such as coughing or wheezing. Like I said, there's 2,000 chemicals you're inhaling. So it's not harmless. It's not just water vapor. It does irritate the lungs and the airway. So, coughing and wheezing is going to occur if you are vaping, especially if you're vaping more frequently. You can also tell if there's e-cigarette supplies like cartridges or new items that they're using. So I don't have anything on me, but like a little USB stick, the end of a USB stick, that's what it kind of looks like, is when they replace their pod in their mod in their vape. If you see those hanging around the house that you're probably like, that's weird, I don't know what this is. That could be a vape product. And then, like I said, new smells, especially fruity or sweet scents, are appearing, especially in their room. I know that there's a lot of youth who do it in their bedroom or, maybe in their basement or the office, and they have the window open so that they blow the vapor out of the window. But it is I'm sure if you've seen someone vaping on the streets or you've been walking behind somebody who is vaping, it's a very obvious scent that's coming from this vapor cloud. It like I said, for youth, they love the fruity and candy, like bubblegum flavored pods and stuff like that. So you'll usually smell something sweet that is abnormal to you. So it might not be a new body spray that anybody is having in their bedroom. It could be a vape product. So when we think about vaping and health impacts on youth, so like what is this doing to them? So the human brain, youth, we're developing all the way through to the early 20s. So what happens when you are consuming nicotine during the time of brain development is that it can have an impact on your frontal lobe. So your frontal lobe is responsible for attention, learning, memory, and other things as well. So when you think about that, when you're consuming nicotine and it's having an impact, and it's having an impact on your frontal lobe, it can have an impact on the brain cell activity in there and interfere with those, the attention and learning and memory pieces of the brain, which can obviously affect their schooling and their attention span and kind of their retention and that sort of things when it comes to studying. And so when you start vaping under the age of 21, that's actually when it gets to be the worst in youth during that period of time. And it also has an impact on different mood disorders and like impulse control when you do start consuming nicotine at a young age. So the second question that we got submitted was how to explain to my child that vaping is dangerous without sounding like I'm lecturing them. There's kind of two parts to this. One is really just understanding the what they're consuming. So having a good grasp on, nicotine addiction, because if they're vaping, they're likely vaping a nicotine product or cannabis product, but really important to know the addictive properties of nicotine and recognize that this is an addiction. And so that's first and foremost when you talk to a child, your child, or a child you're caring for. And then the other part of this, and we'll get into this more later when it comes to having conversations about vaping, is just being compassionate and really putting yourself in their shoes and coming from a place of understanding versus lecturing. So the first thing, obviously, like I just said, is about nicotine addiction and understanding nicotine addiction. So when we think about nicotine addiction, well, we know that most youth are picking up vapes because they think, oh, this is going to help reduce my stress and cope with my anxiety, and it's going to make me feel calmer. Well, what we really want to understand, and this is what you want to explain to your child, is that it's the nicotine that's actually doing this to them and reducing and making them feel calm. So it releases dopamine when you inhale nicotine into your bloodstream. It releases dopamine, which is like a happy hormone, and that makes you feel calm and like you have a rush when you're consuming this. But the interesting thing to note here is that every puff of a vape draws a varying amount of nicotine consumed, so that rush might feel different in intensity every time. So for example, if I'm a youth and I'm vaping and I'm feeling anxious, I'm right before a test, I might take a really long drag of my vape and I'm going to feel a lot calmer and relaxed for a longer period of time because I just consumed more nicotine. But then the other part of that is that sometimes maybe I'm in a rush and I grab my vape and I take a really quick hit and then it scratches the itch and then 10 minutes later I need another hit. It's because I'm getting a different amount of nicotine every time I consume versus when you have a cigarette, one cigarette has X amount of nicotine in every single cigarette. So you know that when you consume that cigarette, you're going to get the same feeling every single time. And so when we think about that, when the most common reason for youth to reach for a vape is to manage their stress and cope with their anxiety, you want to really explain to them in a compassionate way and a non-judgmental way, because most of these youth who are consuming this now likely are addicted. And so we want to just treat that with that lens of I'm here to help you, and this is why. And you can explain this to them. This is a really great diagram that really explains it. This is a smoking one, but nicotine's the same as it is smoking and vaping. So you can really explain it to them that way. And then when we think about vaping and how it has an impact on lung health specifically, so e-cigarettes really entered the market kind of around 10 years ago. And so we're really learning like the long-term effects of vaping on this. Like I said, it took years and years and years of research to come up with those black pig lungs and say, this is what smoking does to your lungs. We're in that period right now of figuring out what this does to your lungs in the long term. We do have recorded cases of e-cigarette or vaping use associated lung injury. So it's called EVALI. So youth are presenting to the emergency department. They have, shortness of breath. They're having trouble breathing. Some of them might, really be struggling. They could have collapsed lungs, emphysema. pneumonitis. And so really their lungs are super affected, especially a lot of youth present like they have pneumonia. And then when they start digging into their health history and they ask them if they vape, then they start looking at different things. And so we've started to see cases come out saying that vaping has an effect on, pneumonitis, pneumonia, and that kind of stuff. So this video right here is actually from the UK. We do have recorded cases in Canada, many in the US, but this one in the UK is with a doctor, and he really explains it really well.
Don't get into peer pressure, because it don't get you nowhere. If you end up like how I did, through to peer pressure, your friends aren't going to be able to help you when you can't walk or breathe. Just please don't do it. I nearly lost my life. I've lost my career, and my whole life changed really. And it don't just affect you, it affects all your family and everyone around you, because you can't actively do what you do from day to day.
The thing is that vapes are not risk-free at all. So you've got about 2,000 different chemicals, some of which are toxic. But in Johns Hopkins University, they did research. They found traces of metals which are potentially toxic in the heating coils. They found pesticides. They found toxic flavorings. It's the illegal ones that are most dangerous because they're totally unregulated. But even the regulated ones are not risk-free. Whilst they are safer than smoking tobacco, which causes cancer because tobacco contains tar, there's so many ingredients in vapes. We don't know what the long-term risks are. These products are in their infancy. Down the line, we're going to see far more people with lung injuries, as many pediatric respiratory physicians are now saying. They're seeing more teenagers now under the age of 18 who are either addicted to nicotine or have got lung damage already.
Don't get into
So that's just an example that came right off of TikTok. It was on Good Morning Britain. These comments at the bottom are also comments pulled from this video specifically about different people commenting. And, I always encourage people to actually go and check out #QuitVaping or #VapingLungInjury on TikTok, because there are several different videos of young people posting their story about vaping. And then all of these, healthcare practitioners, nurses, doctors, respirologists commenting back on them or stitching the videos together and saying like, yes, I can back this up. I've seen cases like this. And it's really eye-opening to see how many are actually out there.
Don't get into peer pressure.
So the third question that we got is, my child has the "that can't happen to me" mentality. How can I approach this? And this is a really common thing. Like I just mentioned, if you go and look at the comments on TikTok and replies to different videos, most youth have this mentality. So it's not an uncommon thing to have. So if your child or a child you care for has this mentality, they're not alone. And you're probably not the only caregiver that has encountered this problem as well. But I think just to know that while vape products are regulated in Canada, your child should know that there are still off-market products and unregulated products that are being sold or just given to them. So we don't really know what could be in that vape. And so we know that 56% of youth acquire vape products from a social source. So they're not getting it from their parents. They're getting it from a friend of a friend of a friend, maybe a friend's parent. They're not actually getting it from somebody that they likely would trust and interact with on a regular basis. And so when we think about that, they don't really know what's coming into what they're consuming. And so what I mean by that is that anybody could really, bootleg a vape pod and put different chemicals in it from under their kitchen sink and then give that to your child, which I don't want to, put the fear in anybody, but it is a thing. Especially there's been cases out in BC of youth actually creating them themselves with products under the sink, and then it ends up having a really big, it can be quite scary because these products can be quite detrimental if you're inhaling some of those household products. So when we think about it, you just want to make sure that you're really letting them know that like they don't know what they're consuming all the time. And just remind them that there's still 2,000 chemicals that they're inhaling every single time that they take a puff from their vape. And that can really put them at a risk of different health problems, and really could contribute to different things that they might not anticipate that they happen. So I think that that would be a good approach. You can also just in the moment talk to them about looking into different apps about quitting. So we're going to dive into more of this, but our program, like I mentioned at the Lung Health Foundation, is called Quash. It was designed with youth and for youth, recognizing that everybody has a different experience when it comes to quitting smoking or vaping. It's judgment-free and grounded in behavior change. So it's backed up by evidence-based, science and research. It has a whole bunch of different program elements to it. So our first program element that we have is our website. It's at quashapp.com. You can go and visit it. It walks you through the health effects of vaping, the benefits of quitting vaping, as well as the stages of change that they might identify with. So the stages of change model is a behavior change model that the program is rooted in. There's 6 different phases, and they might recognize that they are falling into one of those categories, and that assesses their readiness to want to change their behavior or quit vaping. So it walks them through all of that. It also contains an entire page of resources dedicated for youth. So it's all organized by province. You click Ontario, there's a bunch of different categories, mental health resources, resources for Indigenous youth, resources for 2S LGBTQ+ youth. There's a whole list of resources, and it's great to use as a parent as well. We also have a mobile app, so that's kind of our poster child for the program. It's available on Apple Store and Google Play. It's free to download, and it's available in French and English, so they can create a quit plan. They can track how much money they've saved, log their quit days, put their cravings in there, journal, and find different supports to help them quit as well. We also have a facilitator training. So it's an online self-guided free e-module course that educates adult allies on how nicotine impacts teen development, youth engagement principles, and strategies to support youth to quit smoking or vaping. So this really is geared to primarily those who work with youth, so teachers, community health workers, public health nurses, because a part of the program is that once you complete this training, you can actually facilitate the Quash program in person with a group of youth and lead them through 7 sessions. And it focuses on educating youth about nicotine addiction, the quitting process, relapses, and provides them with the skills that they need to quit. Now, that is not to say that you are not able to take the training. It's free, it's online, it's self-guided, so you can go back and forth and complete it as you want. The training really is super, super rich in material. You will learn so much. So even if you don't want to facilitate the program or you aren't going to facilitate the program, it's still a very great course to take, to complete, just to understand more, especially even if maybe your child or a child you care for, or maybe you work with youth, is vaping. You can go in there and learn more information and how to support them. And then we also have our toolkit. So this was created in partnership with Ontario Public Health Units. It's available on our website at quashapp.com/conversations. And it provides very quick and easy knowledge and skills to have conversations about vaping with youth. So how can you use Quash as an adult in a caring role? First, you can visit the website and refer youth to the website as well. You can utilize the Conversations Toolkit to learn how to talk to youth about their vaping. You can also join the Quash app as an ally and support youth in your life while they quit. So maybe your child downloads the app, creates a profile. You can also join the app as an ally. You would select that upon registration. You can create a group with your child or a child that you care for, and you can monitor. I don't want to say that you're policing them, but you can monitor their progress and see how they're doing. So are they logging their quit days? Are they doing their healthy habits? Are they staying up to date on the app? That's a really great feature. And then you can also search the Quash resource pages for more resources in your area for a youth in your life. So you can refer them over to that as well. And you can actually find resources to brush up on any of your other skills as well. So, like I said, are there any features on the app that I can support my child? Like I said, you can download the app, join as an ally, you can create a group with them and kind of walk through the process, the quit process with them. And then you can also support them as well. I think something really interesting is, like I said, if you wanted to complete the facilitator training, you are more than welcome to complete the training. You can also, if you wanted to, have a Quash program at home and in your home, you could totally walk your child or a child you care for through the sessions. Maybe do it on a Sunday afternoon, maybe on a Sunday morning, or whenever you want to do it. But all of the content to deliver the program is available in the training. So all the material, everything that you want, you can do is in there. And that also provides you the opportunity. I know in one of the modules, you create a quit plan with them. So you walk through how to create a quit plan, how to set goals, and all of that kind of stuff. So it could be a very great tool that you could use with your child if they are vaping and looking to quit. So what do we do now? I know that I just kind of framed up, what the vaping problem is, why it's a problem, the health impacts of it, how you can use Quash, but like what else can you do as a caring adult in the life of youth? So it starts with youth. So with you, so we recognize that a lot of the work that we do when it comes to youth vaping happens in the public health, in the government, and the school levels. But an important space to have these conversations in a very non-judgmental and supportive manner is in safe and supportive households. And so because public health and school staff aren't always with young people and can't always be there to have conversations with them about vaping, we are trying to equip as many staff and educators as we can with the skills that we're providing you as well, so that they can have conversations with youth when it comes to vaping. But as a parent or a caring adult, you have a unique opportunity to connect with someone in your life who might be using vape products or wondering about vape products, or even maybe they're experiencing some health-related behaviors when it comes to vaping. So before you talk, there are some key points that you want to think about to prepare yourself to have this conversation with them about vaping. So the first one is just to know the facts. So before the conversation, get all the information you need to know, key dangers, motivation. So attending this webinar was really great, a really great starting point because we just provided you with that information. The number one thing you want to really think about is that you might not feel like an expert, and that's totally okay because we're not expecting you to be an expert. The second thing you want to think about is putting yourself in their shoes. So today in 2024 is likely not the same social environment and social pressures that you faced when you were your child's age. So you really want to think about what they could be facing, the obstacles, the peer pressure, the social environment before you address their concerns, and really get on their level and try to relate to them as much as possible, because it is quite a complex environment that youth are growing up in these days. And so you just want to kind of remind yourself of that as well. You also want to take an open and calm approach. So you want to disarm the notion that this is a lecture and provide an environment to discuss ideas without making them feel like they are being blamed or in trouble. Most youth who are vaping are hiding it because they don't want their parents to get mad at them. And so if we break that barrier, that wall down about, your parents, they might be upset internally, but they're showing a caring and supportive manner externally, then that means that they might trust you a little more to have that conversation with them. And so just remembering that, to just be calm and take a calm approach to things. And then also find the right time and place. So asking your child about vaping when it is already top of mind gives you kind of a non-confrontational way to learn about your child's awareness, interest, and involvement without defensiveness. So obviously, perhaps you don't just pull them out of the room and sit them down and say, hey, we're talking about this. Pick a good time and place about this. Like maybe you're seeing an article, maybe you send them an article on Instagram or something, you slide into their DMs about it. Maybe you're walking or driving by a vape shop and it kind of just sparks conversation. You say, wow, I've noticed that these pop open a lot. Like, what do you know about vaping? And kind of go into that conversation that way so that it doesn't look like you're setting them up to have this conversation right away. We also think about tips for talking with youth about vaping. Think about this. So, be curious, ask open-ended questions, be patient because they probably won't be ready to talk, or like maybe they aren't ready to talk at all about vaping. Be empathetic but emphatic. So make sure that you are, reasoning with them and being empathetic and like understanding. But also you still are their parent, and so you want to make your stance clear in a non-confrontational manner. And then let them know that the conversation will continue. So, maybe you had a very brief 2-minute conversation with them and they weren't really interested. Say I'm going to come back to this. Like this conversation's not done. We're going to keep talking about this kind of thing. So while you are talking to them, acknowledge your child's independence. So whether they're 14 or 18, they're in high school and it's a totally different phase of their life where they like to feel that they're independent, especially when you hit that 16-year mark when they're excited, they're driving, they're feeling a little more independent. They see themselves in a different manner every day than you do. And so they're likely making their own decisions every day. And the decision to vape or not to vape is just one of the many decisions they have to deal with every day. So think about that. Ask for their perspective. Listen with a good ear, hear their side of the story, ask what's being discussed with their friends. Ask them, like, how do you feel about vaping? Are your friends vaping? Are they not vaping? Are they interested? Do they find it appealing? Like, just get curious with them. Obviously, without peppering them with 1,000 questions, because, like I said, they might not be ready to talk and be totally resistant to this. So you can have that perspective as well. Be ready to hear that they might have vaped. So it's not uncommon that they have vaped at this point. We showed you the stats. Many youth have, over 5 million youth have tried vaping, which is a lot of them. And so when you think about it, they might have tried vaping. And so be ready and be prepared to that and steer the conversation in a way. If they say, yes, I have tried it, but I didn't like it, get curious about that. Why didn't you like it? Acknowledge, thank you for telling me. I really appreciate your openness and your honesty, and go from there. Also explain to them how vaping can prevent them from achieving their goals. Try saying, like, I know that trying it once won't kill you, but vaping is harmful to your lungs, your body, and it's addictive. Like, why take the risk? So, like I said, get on their level and be relatable to them. So if your child is an athlete and they are vaping, relate to that. Hey, you really love hockey. Hey, you really love basketball. Hey, you love dance. Like, you vaping is impacting your lungs. So, is it really worth doing that? Also connect with what they care about. So like I said, it's connecting to what matters to them is important. So if that, maybe it's not sports, but maybe it's their skin. Maybe they're taking care of their skin and they love it, and they, they go to Sephora and they spend all their money on face wash and whatever else they can find. But, talk about that. Say, hey, vaping has an impact on your skin. And this is, have we thought about quitting? So another question we got is, how do I support my child who has tried to quit vaping and is unsuccessful so many times? As a parent, This can be extremely frustrating. And so I want to acknowledge that. But like I said at the beginning, if your child is vaping and they've tried to quit many times and they have not, there's a couple things here. One, vaping, nicotine is an addiction. It's one of the most addictive substances that you can consume. Research has shown it's almost as addictive as cocaine or heroin. And so that's the first thing that you need to think of, is that this is an addiction and it's hard to quit. Your second thing is to be non-judgmental and be super supportive and not confrontational. And just say that, you know, most youth, most anybody who tries to quit smoking or vaping, do it without support usually, and that's on their own. And they don't typically succeed on the first time. It's very rare that someone takes one quit attempt and they're good to go for the rest of their life. So it's very hard, and acknowledging that it's very hard is something else. And then you also just want to remind them that you're there to support them and talk them through and ask them questions about what they've done, what they've tried, what's worked, what hasn't worked, and then really sit down and, you know, work on a plan like that. So how can you help? So like I said, we were discussing the methods of how to have a conversation with youth. And I was saying that pick the time and the place. It doesn't need to be this perfect setting where you pull them out of the room and you sit them down on the couch and you have this whole thing. This can be in the car, you can be on a walk, you can be really wherever, but it really only takes about a 3-minute conversation about vaping to start to getting youth start thinking about changing their behavior. So they're meant to be very quick. So some key elements of having these very quick conversations with them about vaping. So we recognize that not everybody has the opportunity to have very long, drawn out conversations with their child about vaping. And it might even intimidate us of like to have conversations about them in fear of saying something that we don't know. So we've partnered up with Ontario Public Health units and experts that work in this field to create a toolkit and a method, you could say, of how to guide these conversations that you're having. So when you're engaging with youth, remember these 2 steps: ask and act. So those are your 2 steps. You can say the 2 A's, but these are your 2 steps: is ask and act. So step 1 is ask. So if you have an opportunity to speak with your child about vaping, if you suspect they are vaping, or if you just want to have an open conversation about it with them, ask them open-ended questions so that you can learn more about their thoughts on vaping. And these are some of the questions that you can ask. What do you think about vaping? What do you think about stopping if they admit that they are vaping? Do you know how vaping can impact your health? Just a really open-ended conversation. You know, do your friends vape? Are people at your school vaping? And that kind of stuff. And then once you've done the ask part of this, you really want to go into the act step. And so once you've had the opportunity to ask them about their vaping or vaping in general, you're now able to act. So how you act depends on whether or not they're open to changing their behavior. So if your child says, I do vape, or if you know your child vapes, and they said, yes, I am ready to quit, that's great. We're going to walk you through how to help them. But if they are not open to change, don't give up on them, because most youth who are not ready to change, most youth who are vaping are not ready to change. And that's mostly because vaping is a trendy, cool thing to do right now among youth. And most youth who, you want to get them to quit vaping are not going to quit because it's a social thing and they want to fit in with their peers. And so most youth are not going to be ready to give that up. So if they're not open to changing, your goal is to help them come to realize that their vaping is doing more harm than good. So you don't have to lecture them, but you really want to make sure that you provide them with the information that they need to check out. Maybe you even walk through the information with them. So you can ask questions to build their trust. you can learn their perspective, raise awareness of the risks, challenges, and alternatives to vaping. And then you can provide them to resources to help educate them. So one of the resources that's created by the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit is notanexperiment.ca. The phenomenal resource and talks a lot about all the different benefits of quitting vaping, the negative effects of vaping has on your health, and the different sneaky ways that the tobacco industry actually targets youth. And on that point, if you have not seen the Jewel documentary on Netflix, I highly recommend that you go and watch that because it provides so much insight into how big tobacco markets towards youth, especially when it comes to vape flavoring. So nonexperiment.ca, that's a great resource to send youth to. If they are open to change though, and they do say to you, hey, look, I am vaping, I hate it, I don't want to do it anymore, I don't know how to quit. That's probably not how they're going to say it, but they could. In a dream world, that's how they would say it. You can talk to them about different resources. So obviously we have our Quash app and our Quash program. It's a great resource to send them to. The Stop Vaping Challenge is from the Ontario Tobacco Research Unit. It's also an app. It's an abstinence challenge. So they click, I'm done vaping, and then it's an abstinence challenge to see how far they go cold turkey without vaping. And then again, you can go on Not an Experiment because there's also quit help on that page that walks them through how to create a quit plan for them. So it really does it all, but those are the resources that we recommend. And then when we think about when you're having this conversation, you've finished having these conversations about so ask them about their vaping, ask them about vaping in general. And then when you act and you say like, okay, well, here's some more information about vaping in case you're ever curious about trying it, or if you're curious about this, or you're curious about that, you can go to Not an Experiment. Or perhaps they admit to you they are vaping. Well, here's the ways you can help, and you can go to Not an Experiment and check it out. You can visit quashapp.ca. And then if they say, I'm ready to quit and I need help, then that's when you take it one step further and you can create a quit plan with them and download the app and walk them through the quit process that way. But when you think about these conversations, or if you're going to have conversations with youth or your child about vaping, you want to think about these different questions. How can I approach the topic of vaping while creating a safe and open space to talk? What kind of questions can I ask to learn more about the youth's experience and point of view? And how can I act to provide the youth with additional support? But more than anything, and I've said this a few times throughout this presentation, is that you need to be compassionate when it comes to youth who are vaping. And I know that, when we think about your child, it's your child who's doing this behavior that's harming their health, and your first, thought process might be you're angry and you're disappointed. But you really have to understand that youth who are experiencing poor mental health are 1.8 times more likely to vape, and 31% of youth who vape report doing it as a form of stress reduction. So when we do think of this, just remind yourself again, like I've said, this is an addiction. Most youth don't even know that they're consuming nicotine, and they don't even know why they're addicted and keep reaching for it. So there's a huge misunderstanding about what is actually being consumed. And so just be compassionate, because them vaping might just be the tip of the iceberg of what you're seeing. And as parents and caring adults, we want to understand that there could be all these underlying reasons that they might be choosing to vape. So you just want to remember to just be compassionate and calm and supportive, and you really want to help them if they are vaping. So if you want to learn more about this, you can actually head over to quashapp.com/conversations. This is our Brief Conversations Toolkit. Like I mentioned, it was created in partnership with Ontario Public Health Units and public health experts. And so it was taken from evidence-based behavior change concepts called brief contact interventions. And we've simplified it so that the training that we use, that clinicians use, doctors, nurses, any of those types of healthcare practitioners use this method, but we've simplified it so that anybody can really have conversations with youth about vaping. And so if you are interested, what's inside the toolkit? It is a fully comprehensive digital tool. It's available in French and in English, and it contains worksheets, infographic posters, videos, and learning modules for you to dive into. It's a fantastic resource, and we're very happy to share it with you. And so if you would like to check out more information, that's where you can find it. So just to close off of our webinar today, we're going to just pull up our polls again and see if we can answer these questions. And then we will wrap up for the evening. So thanks everyone for joining tonight. I know it's the end of the school year. Everyone's busy. I really appreciate you coming and taking the time and learning more about how to support your child or a child you care for who is vaping. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please feel free to reach out to me at edu4@lunghealth.ca. Thanks everyone. Have a great night.